it's working. All righty. Yeah. Anyone over there seeing anything? Okay, I think we're live. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I think we're live and I think we're good now. And let's make sure our slides are working. All right, so thank you once again, everyone, for joining us for Tuesday Talks. We are so happy that you've joined us once again for this conversation. And just a review on the nuts and bolts. We are, as usual, wanting to spend a good amount of time with questions at the end. And so if you have questions, we really encourage you to go ahead and start asking them right away in the Q&A box so that we can start kind of looking at what you're asking and be able to kind of fold it into our conversation, but also consolidate so that everybody gets a chance to get at what they want to talk about. And the other thing is, let's see, we are once again brought to you this week by Single Yellow Rose. Single Yellow Rose is a tool for waitlist. And so if you have a friend who's a senior who got on a waitlist, or if you're a counselor and you have students that are on waitlist, we encourage you to go and tell them about Single Yellow Rose. They get to use one rose to give to their dream school. And so you'll find out for more information from this URL. And then I wanted to make sure today that I gave a shout out and a big thank you to all of the high schools that are helping us make this happen. We're really, really excited to have this high school list continue to grow, and representatives from so many of these schools are on this call right now. So just wanted to give a special shout out to all of you and thank you for that. And finally, before we dive in, I am super honored to have three special guests with me today. And we just wanted to start off today with acknowledging that it's been a really tough week, and many of us have been pretty heartbroken and heartsick, and some of you might be feeling pretty angry or fearful, and there are some of us, like some of you, that might be just kind of unsure even how to feel. So we are really grateful to have this space. I'm really grateful for my colleagues here to have this space during Tuesday Talks to kind of sit in some of that, that discomfort and that uncertainty together. As we always have, Tuesday Talks has started off in a time of uncertainty, and we continue to just kind of want to be able to have that safe place of dialogue. And while we know that we don't always have the right answers or some answers at all, I do know that these colleagues care deeply about students, and they care deeply and they work very hard every day to build classes of people that are going to challenge one another, of people that are going to be influences of change, that they're creating communities of courage. So I find hope and comfort in that. And so I hope that you all do too. And I just really want to thank you, Sarah, Clara, and Maggie, for sharing your time with students and parents and counselors today. So with that, I'd like to welcome my guests. If you all want to kind of just wave and introduce, say your name real quick and introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Great. Hi, y'all. I'm Sarah, and I am at Georgia Tech.
My name is Claire. I'm at the University of Virginia.
And I'm Maggie from UMass Amherst.
Great. Thank you so much, Gloria. And thank you all for being with us today. I think Gloria set us up really well to start at Georgia Tech. And I just want to really quickly introduce some of the basics of who we are at Georgia Tech. I'll say that, of course, each of us is a public institution. And as such, you're going to hear about some of the similarities a little bit later, but there are also a little bit of differences at each institution in the US. And so to learn more, check out each of our individual information sessions through our admission offices. We just want to kind of give you the highlights of who we are today, of things you shouldn't go away not knowing. And at Georgia Tech, Gloria spoke about how each of us is really trying to create a caring community of change makers. And at Georgia Tech, that is central to who we are. It's represented in our motto of progress and service. Georgia Tech is an institution that isn't a great place for people who love to learn just for the sake of learning. That's a really noble cause. But Georgia Tech is a much better fit for students who love to learn for the sake of doing, right? Who love to learn for the sake of actually solving problems and creating solutions to some of the most challenging issues we face in our communities. And so we are really focused on applied learning, things like co-ops, internships, research, getting involved in our maker spaces on campus. And the Georgia Tech academic experience is certainly a highly focused one. We are a community of about 16 to 17,000 undergraduate students, but only offer 36 majors, really intentionally, that no matter what you study at Georgia Tech, you're doing so through the lens of science, technology, industry, and research. And so we're certainly excited to help you get to know more about us in the future, but also more about public institutions here today. And I'll turn it over to Clara.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. So the University of Virginia is a mid-sized research university located in Charlottesville, Virginia. For those of you coming from outside the US, our closest international airports are in Washington, D.C., about a 2.5 hour drive. Charlottesville is a great place to live. It's what we traditionally think of as a college town, where the university and the city of Charlottesville really come together and work back and forth to provide different kinds of arts and sporting events, as well as great access to the outdoors. The University of Virginia was founded over 200 years ago, so it's one of the oldest universities in the US, and it was really founded to be a living and learning environment. Here you'll see the lawn, the academical village, which is the center of grounds, which is what we call our campus. This is where students and faculty traditionally lived, and students still live on the lawn today. They can apply to live on the lawn in their 4th year, and it is seen really as the greatest honor someone can have as a UVA student. I have one more slide. And UVA is really known for 2 things. It's student self-governance and our commitment to honor. Student self-governance is really the idea that students at the university have the power to create change, and students are constantly moving the university forward, deciding what they want our university community to look like, as well as what they want our broader communities to look like as well. And then we have our honor code. We have the oldest honor code in the US. It's very simple. It is no lying, no cheating, and no stealing. All students live by this honor code, and really what it does is create a community of trust between students. It's not designed to be scary. It's not designed to get anyone in trouble, but it really creates a community where students trust each other to do the right thing. UVA does have a wide variety of majors. We have over 75 majors to choose from across 8 different undergraduate schools and colleges. It really was founded to be a liberal arts university, but we have since added things like engineering, architecture, commerce, and our newest program, which is our School of Data Science. And UVA is also known for having some of the highest retention and graduation rates, especially among public universities in the US. I think it speaks to students having a positive experience here, wanting to stay at UVA. But I think it also speaks to the resources and support that we have available. Any issue that you could come across as a student, there are resources here through faculty and through staff, but also just through other student groups. And it's important to find that sense of community and find that sense of support with other students. That's it for me for now, but I will pass things over to Maggie.
All right, UMass Amherst. UMass Amherst, we are located in Massachusetts. That is what we call the New England area, northeast of the United States. In this area, the New England area, UMass Amherst is the most comprehensive research university. Excuse me. And then, so the state university, UMass Amherst is a system. So there are UMass Amherst, UMass Boston, UMass Dartmouth, and UMass Lowell. If you're familiar with the California system university, and then everybody knows UCLA is the California University of California, Los Angeles, and there's Berkeley. Is it a similar idea? Is there a state university system? And then we are University of Massachusetts Amherst. And again, it's in Massachusetts, of course, in Amherst, and that is 2 hours away from Boston. Next slide, please. So a little bit about UMass Amherst. Last year, we ranked 26 among all the public universities. So the ranking has a different way they rank. So in this category is they combine all the public universities. And then UMass Amherst ranked 26. We are located in a very nice and safe college town. When we talk about college town, is that here in this town and people's job, people's life is surrounded by all the universities. If you think of like an industrial town, and then in that area, there's many factories or companies, it's kind of the same idea. So college town in this area, there's many universities, colleges. For example, Amherst here in this small town, there is us, UMass Amherst, and there is Amherst College, that is liberal arts college, and then Hampshire College, and Mount Holyoke College, and Smith College. And then, so 5 of us that we combine, we form as a 5 colleges consortium. And then this consortium that benefit to students that you can take courses at UMass, you can take courses at Smith College, and then, or Amherst College. And there are the research opportunity is like a inter-campus, that kind of setting. So it was there's a lot of resource that for students, a lot of opportunities. UMass Amherst, right now we have about more than 100 undergraduate degree programs. So many of our students, they come to UMass, they do double major, major and minor. That is very important for undergraduate students. You can boost your opportunity to get a job. So there will be a lot of programs for students to choose from. One thing very important is the student organizations. So coming to the US to have your higher education, getting degrees is very important, but we strongly encourage that you can expand your network, making friends through this all these wonderful student clubs. Dining, we rank our campus dining rank #1 in the United States. We're very proud of this. If you ask UMass students about our dining, everybody would say the dining is so good. From the all the international cuisine, and then it's just amazing. And we joke about this, but seriously, we are a research university. Basically, we do everything based on research. So when we back 10 years ago, when we were thinking about how we can make our students happy, how we can make our students a success, there are three things that we pay attention to. One is the housing. You have to provide a good housing, safe housing for students, good food, so they will be happy. And then combine all this together, you will have to be affordable, not too expensive. So when students have a nice place to live, good food to eat, they will be happy. And then when they're happy, they study hard. So that's really based on the research that we changed our entire dining and make it so amazing. Right now, we have about 23,000 undergraduate students at UMass Amherst, along with 7,000 graduate students. So altogether, it's about 30,000 students. That's all about UMass Amherst. Thanks.
So Maggie, I think this is still you, except that she might have frozen. So Maggie, you still with us? Sarah, do you want to jump in real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. And Maggie, if you get back on, let me know and I'll tap out. But so as I mentioned earlier, because we are all public research institutions, there are some kind of qualities that are fundamental and foundational to what that means, what a public institution is. And Maggie, or do you want to jump back in and talk about what a public institution is?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So, okay. So what is a public institution? So basically, the public university is the money is funded by state government. And the money is from the taxpayers. For example, I am in Massachusetts. I pay tax to the state and then some as many others. And then so public university, that the funding, and then the state government will have a budget for UMass Amherst, for UMass Boston. And then, so what does it mean to you is that the tuition. So there will be like a public university, you will have like a in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition. So students from Massachusetts, they are paying in-state tuition. Out-of-state tuition is out-of-state including international. So a student from Saudi Arabia is paid as much as a student from California if you come to UMass Amherst. And then so in-state and out-of-state. And also we have the, but all the, I think, I don't know other universities, but most universities like at UMass, we provided a scholarship for out-of-state, including international students. So normally in-state students, they will not get a lot of scholarship, but out-of-state international students will get, some money. The reason for that is to kind of narrow the gap. Between out-of-state and in-state. So that's the tuition wise. Whereas the private university like MIT or Harvard, they are private universities. So they will only have one tuition, regardless where you're from, regardless of your citizenship or residency. Everybody is paying the same. And of course, they also provide scholarship for students. So this is a tuition differences between in-state and out-of-state. Let me see, I took some notes. Oh, and also state university, public university are regulated by state government. There are many different kind of regulation from state to state. And then just give you an example, like UMass Amherst, that Massachusetts, the Higher Ed Department of Massachusetts, regulated that every student, if your GPA below 2.0, then it's not admissible. So this is just a very broad example. So basically, we are regulated by our state government. Thank you.
And there are several characteristics that public research universities tend to have in common. There are, of course, differences between all of our universities, all of our campuses, but these are a few common threads. Public research universities tend to be large and very diverse. I think the size can be intimidating when you're first thinking about it, much bigger than your normal high school, but the size can also really be an asset because of all of the opportunities that are available academically, socially, professionally, in terms of internships and work experiences. And all of our universities have very wide global networks. I know at least for UVA, we have alumni chapters around the world that are very active, hosting events every year, interacting with prospective students, as well as hosting events for parents and alumni. So if you end up at a large research university like this, make sure that you take advantage of those opportunities, that you find your niche at the university, and that you find ways to really make it smaller and take advantage of as many opportunities as you can. We are all research universities. It's a big part of what each of our universities do. That means we have really world-class, outstanding faculty. Many of our faculty are experts in their fields and really recognized nationally and internationally for the work that they're doing. I think this can be another misconception with research universities, that research, it's just for faculty or just for graduate students, and that isn't the case at all. Many of our undergraduate students at UVA get involved in research, and they do that in the sciences and engineering, but research happens in every single department, as well as interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary research, and it's available to students as soon as their first year. So lots of ways to get involved in this way as well. And another commonality is major level athletics. That is often Division I athletics at our universities. And I know I kind of tune out sometimes with sports if I'm not into football or basketball or something like that. But really what athletics serves to do is just create a sense of community and a sense of school spirit. UVA won the national championship in basketball a couple of years ago, and it just really brought students and brought the community together. It was a real bonding moment, and I also have to give credit where credit is due. Our women's swimming and diving team just won the national championship, so shout out to that team as well. So if you end up at a big research university with Division I athletics, try a American football game, a basketball game. I think UMass Amherst has hockey. Just try it out, just for this sense of school spirit that you'll find at our universities.
All right, so what does it look like when you're applying to big public research institutions in the US? Many of you already know that in the US, many institutions, and particularly selective institutions like each of ours, is using holistic admission rather than this threshold approach. And really, the difference there is that a school that uses maybe that threshold or numerical admission approach or process is looking at maybe a minimum requirement. So a minimum GPA or a specific number of AP courses if you are in an international department somewhere, or a minimum or a specific SAT or ACT score. Whereas holistic admission means that there is no specific formula for getting into a college. We are not only looking at a GPA and a test score, and in fact, are looking at so many different elements of your application, in addition to this idea of fit, right? And so specifically at public institutions, that looks a little bit different because not only are we told which factors that we can or cannot consider in the application holistic review process by, as Maggie mentioned earlier, our state governors. So perhaps a board of regents. So at Georgia Tech, that's the University System of Georgia Board of Regents. And we're told essentially which factors are okay for us to consider and which factors we absolutely must consider, right? So the idea of schools becoming, let's say, test optional or not test optional. At a private institution, the school can just make that decision. At a public institution, we often have to wait for approval or be given directives from our state board of regents about what we can and can't consider in that holistic review process. Also, as part of the holistic review process, each institution, all selective institutions in the US, public or private, are looking at specific institutional priorities, right? Meaning that each institution has a specific mission or priority any given year. Some years those are the same, some years they're different. Maybe there's a new major academic program on campus. And at public institutions, again, we are often handed those priorities from our state representative board that hands us those directives. So one great example of this is the residency split, right? One priority, and specifically at Georgia Tech, this is how it falls, but both UVA and UMass Amherst and also every other public institution in the country would have some sort of expectation in that residency split as well. So at Georgia Tech, for instance, we are expected to be about 60% Georgia resident, because we exist to serve the state of Georgia first, much like UVA in Virginia and UMass Amherst in Massachusetts. So we exist first and foremost to serve the state, which means that we are about 60% Georgia, about 30% US non-Georgia, and then about 10% international in our undergraduate population. And that is a priority that has been set for us essentially by the Georgia Board of Regents. So all of this to say, holistic review is a little bit different at a public institution because though we're considering many of the same factors, those priorities are essentially set for us, not by our own office, but by our state board of regents. Additionally, one thing that we're considering in the holistic review process, or that may vary from school to school, is whether or not you're applying specifically to a major or whether you're applying to the institution overall, right? And whether each individual major in that college is reviewing applications specifically versus the entire institution reading those applications regardless of what major you selected. So major may be part of that holistic review process for you. And then finally, in addition to, of course, your academic transcripts, the writing that you do, how you're engaging outside of the classroom in your activities or your contribution to your communities, some schools are going to be looking at standardized tests. That would be a school that is test required, where you must send an SAT or ACT score. That would also include test optional, where you can choose whether or not you would like to or you're able to submit SAT or ACT scores. And then there's a third category called test blind, where even if you have those scores, you do not get to submit them at all. Those institutions have said we will not consider test scores as part of the holistic review process. I think the three of us on this call today are either in the test required or test optional category, and you'll see that in just a moment. But make sure that you're checking in with each of those schools that you're considering. And then finally, I've already spoken a little bit about this idea of institutional fit, right? recommendation letters, grades, what classes you're selecting in some cases, your writing, what you're doing outside of a classroom are all things that are very easy to describe to you and that are in your control. You can in some way control each of those elements of this holistic review process. Institutional fit is that category that just feels a little bit less transparent. So I'm going to try to make it as clear to you as possible. It is a part of this process that you simply can't control, right? And that's going to be, again, different at every institution. It means really two things. One, how well do you fit the spirit of that campus? How well do you fit into the ethos of a campus community? For instance, at Georgia Tech, I mentioned progress and service from the very beginning. If progress and service is something that's really important to you, something that really resonates with you, that may be a good fit for Georgia Tech. Every single institution is going to have its own motto, its own vision, its own values, mission, and get to know those things before you apply to that institution so that you can align yourself in your application or discern whether or not you would be a good fit for that institution or not. So fit is one part of fit. And then that second part of fit is institutional priority. And that's really the part that is definitely not in your control. And that's the part that I spoke about a little bit ago. For instance, at Georgia Tech, that residency split is a major priority. And you can't all of a sudden make yourself be a Georgia resident. But again, at some institutions, that might be a particular academic program or particular fit of non-academic interests, maybe a new music program starting at a school. So you can always ask any institution that you're looking at what their specific priorities are for the year ahead or the next 5 years or so. And that's going to be part of the factors that we're considering when making admission decisions. And I'll just give a quick intro here that tells you there's a lot more to each of our processes for sure, but here's just kind of a quick glimpse at what that looks like at each of our institutions as well. And I think, Gloria, it's time for questions.
So while we're looking at this is a good segue into some questions. And I know some people have already started asking them, so thank you for that. And for those of you on YouTube and Xiaotong, you can ask questions there too. My colleagues are sending them my way so that we can talk. Real quickly, I actually am going to stop sharing the screen so that people can all see us. Yeah, great. So I think there's still a little bit of confusion might be too strong of a word, but when we talk about kind of public and private institutions from an international student context, it's a little bit hard because international students are not in the state and they're not paying those tax dollars. And so the tuition doesn't make much difference for that decision-making process. But so I guess one question is like, is there anything about a public institution for an international student that feels different than like or is beneficial to consider versus a private institution?
I think I just speaking about UVA was really founded on the idea of students being citizen scholars. So being top students, top scholars, very academically motivated, but also being good citizens, good neighbors. And I think that value really extends to all of our student body about what can students contribute to the Charlottesville community? What can students contribute to the state? And I think a lot of times with public universities, you see that border of the university of campus going beyond campus and seeing about how we can serve the greater public. I think that that's one thing that stands out to me about public universities that I've been to either as a staff member or a student. and that sort of thing. And here we call it citizen scholars, but I'm sure other universities have other names for it. But it's just it's more value based than anything.
Definitely. I also think that kind of the other side of that, right, is that a public institution tends to lend itself to allowing a student to have more responsibility, right, for themselves and their education. This sense of creating a public institution is often viewed as creating an opportunity for students as a public service. And so that mindset of really taking advantage of that and being responsible for your education, meaning that there are going to be so many opportunities at a public institution. I'm not saying those opportunities don't exist at a private school. I mean, by nature of being a public institution, we are expected to have those opportunities available because we exist to serve the public. And it also means that with so many opportunities, there are certainly many support resources in place, but oftentimes a public institution is not a place that is really going to hold your hand and walk you through everything. It's going to be a really good place that has so many resources and support measures in place, but you need to be responsible for saying, I need this support, or I need this resource, or I would like to do undergraduate research. So go ask and go get involved. So a public institution tends to be a good fit for a student who is a little bit more independent and is able to take that responsibility and onus on their educational experience and those opportunities that they want to be involved in as well, because certainly there is a plethora of opportunities for almost anything you could possibly be interested in.
Thank you. Well, so there are some international students that are already in the US, and maybe their parent is working in a state, or maybe there's a green card involved. There are a lot of kind of combinations of citizenship and residency. And so it might be too complex. We can't go into everybody's individual situation, but is there kind of like some guidelines in terms of like how that impacts international student review? If someone is from the US but is an international student, does that change the way that you're looking at their application?
I can take this one. So like a green card, that kind of stuff, you have to, let's take a look at this tuition wise. If you have a green card, or you are a citizen, US citizen abroad, meaning that you have a US passport, but you're in China or in India. So most likely you are, if you're not from Massachusetts, let's say, and then you come to UMass, you're gonna pay what we call the out-of-state tuition. It's same as international. And however, with green card or US passport students, you are eligible to apply for student loan. That is the federal government student loan. And then, and this can be really, really complicated. So I strongly encourage you, when you apply to, if you have green card or you are a US citizen abroad, when you apply to the university, like a public institution, just mention that and send an email to the admissions office or financial aid office, and to see what kind of tuition rate or if you can apply for student loan. And then in the admissions area, how we review your application. If you are a US citizen abroad, like in India, we were at UMass Amherst. When I read your credential, your application, I will put you, compared to other Indian students, because that is the educational education, the curriculum that you have been following. Okay, so I won't put you your transcript to compare to a U.S. student. Meaning the education in the U.S. So that is the reviewing process. So there are many other details, and then every institution, operates differently. So reach out to them and our schools that you're interested and get more information.
Yeah, Sarah, earlier you mentioned, about institutional priorities and such, and being able to, ask, and that they might not always be so transparent, but you can ask. And so what are, like, when you say ask, like there is not a section on the website that talks about institutional priorities. So, what are the opportunities for people to kind of ask those types of questions?
Yeah. Well, they're not going to have a website that says institutional priorities, right? But when you go to a school's website, you are going to be able to find things like mission, value, strategic plan. An institution should have its strategic plan posted somewhere. And when you read an institution's strategic plan, you're pretty much getting to understand the institution's current priorities. Additionally, good questions you could ask would be, are there particular new academic programs that are priorities for you right now? Are there any new non-academic programs that are priorities for you right now? Other good questions would be, are there particular residency requirements, or are there particular locations, geographic areas that are of particular interest to you right now? And demographic interest as well. Each of those things is going to lend itself to what, even if they don't call it institutional priorities, what is that institution's given or priority in that given recruitment cycle?
Yeah. So given that, public institutions are kind of restrained by needing to have a certain percentage in, from in-state, how does that impact, I think there are some questions about, okay, within that, at Georgia Tech, for example, 10% international students. Within that, does that include everybody that's already an international student in the US as well? Are they counted in there? If you're in an IB program, are you counted in there? Who's counted in that 10%? And then, obviously everyone's kind of anxious about how does that impact our acceptance rate? And are you looking at that like right away when you're right as the application comes in, you're like, okay, there's only 10% of people can get in here? Or is it like you're looking at admissibility first, just generally, and then you're kind of sculpting the numbers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Kind of how does it work for each of you who have very different statuses and residency and curriculum? So at Georgia Tech, and I feel like this is probably pretty similar to most places, we are always reviewing a student's application in context of where they are in high school, so that we're reviewing your application appropriately given the opportunities that have been available to you. And so what we're always going to do is that first review or first read of your application in light of where you're physically located. And then as we get a clearer picture of how many of our applicants in our applicant pool are competitive for admission, and spoiler alert, typically the answer is the overwhelming majority, because you're all very brilliant students. So you're just really competitive. At that point is when we start to look at some of those finer points, right? We start to think about shaping, that's what we call it, shaping what our needs are and what our applicant pool looks like. So for enrollment purposes, we are considering any US citizen or any US permanent resident to be a domestic non-resident. So at Georgia Tech, that population would fall into that 30% of non-Georgia residents, but not international. Meanwhile, any non-US citizen or non-permanent resident, regardless of where you're in high school, even if you're in high school in the city of Atlanta, in the state of Georgia, you would be part of that 10% international student population as well.
Claire or Maggie, did you have anything else to add related to that?
I'll add to that. I agree with Sarah completely. But I think we do also have flexibility, maybe more than students realize. We get a lot of rumors here that we'll only take a certain number of students from one high school, or a certain percentage from a certain state or country. And really, we do have a lot of flexibility for UVA. It's 2/3 Virginia residents, and then the other 1/3 is out of state or international. But if we have an exceptionally strong group from one high school, we can take more students than we did the year prior. If the number of applications from the state of North Carolina is up a ton, we can take more students from North Carolina. So we still do have flexibility within the numbers and ratios that we have to follow. So don't worry too much about the numbers. It's not anything that you have control of or have to think about. Just work on creating the strongest application that you can.
Great.
Yes, I totally agree with my colleagues. You know, it's not because you get in or you don't get in. There's nothing to do where you're from or what your citizenship is. What we look at is, like Sarah mentioned, is to look at your application, look at your curriculum, look at your coursework in context, and then your citizenship, your residency is probably nothing that we take the first step. Oh, this is from this area in. This is from this area out. It doesn't work that way, because that we look at your application, holistic review, and then we look at it in context, and then we find the students that really fit into our institution, and then we want to make sure that when you come here, are you going to be successful? So do not worry about this.
Thank you. Well, let's shift a little bit and talk kind of about what the application expectations or competitiveness is. I mean, you all are really great institutions, really quite selective. And so there are a lot of questions, particularly since the test optional is now something that's right? For all three, we're test optional, not yet for Georgia Tech.
Not yet. Right? We are awaiting approval from Georgia Board of Regents.
Okay.
So right now, test required. So check that.
Georgia Tech is test required. The UVA and UMass Amherst, you are test optional for this coming year, correct? Okay. So given the new test optional kind of movement, there is a lot of question about, okay, well, is there a GPA cutoff? Is there an IB cutoff? Or what are those competitive scores? And, do you have the range of competitive scores somewhere on your website? And then if you do, or there's kind of a general known range, what if you fall under? Is that something, then should you just not even apply?
So we do publish a middle 50% for SAT and ACT scores. Those can be found on our website. We also give it in our information sessions. So if you've taken the exams and you want to see where your scores fall, that information is all available to you online. But we have always said that your transcript is going to be the most important thing we look at. Your ACT or SAT score, it's about 4 hours of your time, similar with a TOEFL or an IELTS score. It's such a small part of what you do. So if you choose to submit your scores, we will consider them. But your transcripts are going to show us 3 to 4 years of coursework. We're going to see the rigor of the courses you've taken. We want to see that you've challenged yourself. That can be AP, advanced placement. It can also be international baccalaureate. It can be A-levels. It can be the national curriculum. We just want to see that you're challenging yourself and that you're earning strong grades. And other universities do this differently, but we don't have an average GPA or a minimum GPA. just because every single high school does GPA a little bit differently, that it's not really a fair metric for us to use to compare students. So we're not using GPA. We really are going to be looking at your transcript to see how you've done over time and how you've challenged yourself.
So at UMass Amherst, we do this similar to Virginia, that we publish the 50%, the SAT average and GPA. So we don't have like a minimum requirement. Although the Massachusetts state government to say everyone will have to be 2.0 and above. So that's the only regulation that is regulated by the state government. But UMass Amherst, we don't have like a minimum or that kind of requirement. And in terms of the curriculum wise, when we look at your transcript really shows us a whole story of your high school academic work. There's a lot to tell from what courses that you took, and then what grades that you earned, and so that if you are attending a high school where there's no AP, there's no IB, there's no any international curriculum, you will not be penalized, for not having them, because it's not that you don't want to do it, just because your school doesn't have it. So, but when you are from an IB school or you are from an AP school, and then there are like 21 APs available, but you only chose like one or two, even none, that tells us some kind of story that represents who you are. So I wouldn't worry too much about maybe I should go to IB, maybe I should go to AP. No, because if you compare that, it's like an orange to apple. It's not fair. What we do is to compare apple to apple, orange to orange. So if your schools provided the curriculum, just follow that and challenge yourself under that structure. So, and you will not be penalized if you don't have IB or AP just because your school doesn't have it. So that's a little bit information for you.
Real quickly, because there have been a few questions about majors, and I know UMass Amherst does look at major-specific admissions, correct? Whereas Georgia Tech and UVA, you do not admit, it's not a major admission. So for UMass Amherst, when you are applying for a major, how easy is it for you to then switch your, once you get there?
This is a very good question. So when you apply for a major, that for us is really for the advising purpose. So when you come in, you kind of know what areas that you want to. So we provide a academic advising services just to help you to navigate what you want to do for your entire college career. Major. So there isn't like you can change major. It's very easy. It is very easy. So, but majors have some majors is what we call the open major. Some majors that you probably need to take some prereqs. So, for example, you come in as a math major, but you say, I want to change to history major. Go ahead and just tell your academic advisor and say, I want to become a history major, right? But if you say, and right now I am math major, but I would like to change to computer science, then your academic advisor will say, okay, then let's see if you have math 133 and comp sci something, like 2 prereqs. So some majors, they are open, and some majors, you have to do some work before you change to. Reason for that is to make sure that that major fits you.
Okay, so there are some majors that are easy to switch to and some that are not as easy to switch to, and you'll have to work a little harder to make that happen.
Yeah, because some major, they are really heavily math If you're not good at math and then you go to computer science, then it will be kind of hard to, more challenging to do that. Yes. So
yeah,
so
and I think I'm just going to be pretty like transparent here. What I think people are asking is, can I apply to a easier major to get into with the hope of being able to then switch to the harder, because in theory, well, and the question is it more competitive? Is computer science harder to get into? Is engineering harder to get into? Is there a smaller acceptance rate for those majors? And I think there are a lot of people kind of asking that type of question.
Yeah, but ultimately, like you will find whether or not you really, if you, for example, I'm not good at math, I would never apply to computer science or like math. So if I want to get in, I say, I just apply to dance. No, I'm sorry, like English. And then that's competitive and I get in. But if you can work your way to the major that you desired, you definitely have that opportunity, right?
Okay,
if you,
great.
Yeah, you definitely, it's there's the opportunity.
If you put in the work,
there.
then you have the opportunity. Great, wonderful.
And as an institution that doesn't admit to major or specifically to major, I do want to speak to how we review it in the application process, right? We're looking at your application through the lens of what it is you tell us you want to study. That doesn't mean that we're admitting, if you are applying for math in the College of Sciences, yes, then that is your major when you're admitted, but you can change it at Georgia Tech. That isn't where you're, we're not admitting you to a major, we're admitting you to Georgia Tech, right? But let's say that on your application, you tell us that you want to study chemical engineering, right? We're going to be reviewing your application through the lens of your interest in chemical engineering. What I mean by that is, if you're on an IB curriculum, you're doing the full IB diploma, and you want to study chemical engineering, we expect to see that you're taking higher level math, probably higher level math analysis, doesn't have to be, but probably, and probably higher level chemistry, right? So we're not necessarily admitting you to that major, but we're looking for a compelling and cohesive story in your application. And part of that is how you've prepared yourself for what it is you want to do in college. And so if you're saying, I want to study public policy at Georgia Tech, but every activity on your application is computer science, and all of your extracurricular classes or your AP classes are computer science focused, that's really not part of a compelling or cohesive story. So I hope that helps kind of clarify and shed light on how we're looking at your major in the application process.
Yeah, that's definitely very helpful. Thank you, Sarah. And there are so many other questions, and I'm so sorry that we're running out of time. But so I wanted to make sure to get the contact information up here so that you all know that you can reach out to the individual institutions. There were some institution-specific questions, and each of these schools have many, many resources to do their virtual events and website information. And so please do reach out to these individual schools. That's what we would like you to do. Sarah, Clara, Maggie, so always such a pleasure to spend time with you all. Is there anything you kind of want to close with as we leave? I mean, we didn't talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but if there's like kind of one last takeaway that you want people to go home with tonight.
I think the biggest thing we can say to you all possibly right now is that we are excited to work with you. We want international students on our campus. We work really hard to create communities that care deeply about our international student populations, and we really are excited and welcome you, even though we know that this last year has been really, really tough. In addition to this last week, especially. But regardless of that, we just want you to know that we're excited to work with you and we want you here.
Thank you. Well, once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for Tuesday Talks. We have another great one lined up for next week about upstate New York, a little bit of a different feel than public research institutions. But in the meantime, please reach out anytime you all have questions, give us feedback. We love to hear from you about what you want to talk about. And so we'll make sure whatever didn't get covered here, we'll get covered eventually in one of the Tuesday Talks. So thanks once again for joining us. 谢谢大家. 감사합니다. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.